Hi everyone. In today's video, I wanted to share some important information with you if you are intending to submit a paper to a journal. As an editor-in-chief myself of a journal, I thought that if I share these tips with you, it will help you to avoid rejection, especially rejection at the editor's desk itself. We sometimes call it desktop rejection. This is when the editors receive a submission and they review it themselves and see if it is suitable for the journal or not before they send it to the reviewers to review the paper. As you know, editors will not like to waste the reviewer's time if the submission of the manuscript is not up to the standards. Why I said as you know is that if you are a reviewer of a journal and if you receive a paper that has not been up to the standard that you expect an academic paper to be, you would not like to review it. Also, you will not accept any future submissions or any future manuscripts from this particular editor or journal because it is a waste of a reviewer's time. So what is it that us editors look for when you have submitted a paper? At initial review, what we see is whether the author has adhered or followed the instructions provided to the authors on the journal website. Make sure as an author you have gone through those instructions. Those instructions are very important for you to follow them. You also have to see if your paper or your manuscript or submission falls within the scope of the journal. Most of the journals lay out their scope very clearly. You may look at the title of the journal and think that this particular journal will cover your work or it will accept your work, but it may not be the case. For example, many education-based journals have the title education in them. Now that education has to be clearly laid out as to education. What do they mean by education? There could be many aspects of education. Sometimes the journals are only looking for education as in higher education and not primary education or study about small children or study about infants or anything like that. So you have to be very clear whether this journal includes the scope of the topic that you are writing on, and that you can follow in the instructions. Or you may write a letter to the editor asking them to review the abstract of your paper and see if they will accept the paper if the topic is relevant to them or not. Second, I want to tell you is that the authors are often in a rush to finish their paper. They don't even go through it a few times to check for grammar issues, to check for formatting, to check whether there are any spelling errors or not. Now, these are basic mistakes that should be avoided. An error here or there can be forgiven or overlooked. But consistent errors, spacing issues, sentences not being written properly is not something that editors want to see in the submitted manuscripts. So if you are a singular author, make sure that you have at least got this paper peer reviewed from your friends or your colleagues or your people who are working with you on a project. Or if you are multiple authors, then all of you should make sure that you spend enough time reviewing the content of the paper before this is submitted. One more mistake that authors often make is that when they write the research paper, they often forget to include what are the limitations of a research. So limitations of a research sometimes becomes very important for a journal editor to see, is because no research is perfect. Every research should include some limitations. And those limitations clearly show your grasp of the research concepts as an author, as a researcher. Because then that shows that how you have addressed certain bias or how you have been able to manage certain limitations of your research, and you acknowledge it, you're honest enough to acknowledge it. Now this is not for all editors, this is not for all areas, but most of the journal editors would like to see that. There's another thing that authors often miss. When you write the cover letter for an editor along with your manuscript, in the cover letter very brief information is provided to the editor about what this paper entails, how the research was carried out, what is the contribution of this study, what was the sample size. So there is something that you can mention in a very brief statement to the editor showing the contribution of your paper, the value of your paper, why the editor should accept your paper, why the industry or the community should read your paper, what is the importance of it, how it highlights, how it adds to the current existing research. Now, this is something that you can mention in the cover letter in a few brief points. You can also write it as dot points. In my case, I don't mind reading some dot points about what is the contribution of your research. Why is this research important? And one more thing I want to share with you is that when you are writing a manuscript, look at your research and think about the possible references that you should be adding. Now, if your research requires recent references to be added, then make sure you do that. Some authors, they quote research from the 1960s and 70s, and maybe for a certain point, maybe for presenting a theory that was conceived during that time, you can present that research. But if you're talking about contemporary research, if you're talking about saying that no research in this particular area has been conducted, and you give a reference which is 30, 40 years old back, then that shows me that your research is not relevant, or the references that you are quoting is not relevant. You are not using recent references. If you are using references from 30 years, 40 years back, it kind of tells the editor that you are not reading the recent work that has come out. So showing your knowledge of not only old history or past research, but also recent research, contemporary research, what is being talked about, it's very important. You may say that you have or you can show that you have read the contemporary research, but this is not applicable in your research, or it is not applicable to the topic you are discussing or to the data that you're analyzing. That's fine, but it still shows the editor in your reference list that not only have you included past research, but you have also included current research. You know what is going on in your field, and that is also very important. You also should not be using the same reference multiple times. So what many authors do is that they try to get their own paper cited, or they have read only a major author and 16, 20 of their works and only quoting that. Now, repetitive referencing, unless it is relevant, unless it is applicable to the point that you are making, puts off the editor journal. So what we see is that we think as if you have an agenda. Maybe you or the co-author are trying to promote research, your own research, or research from your university, or you are trying to present a topic or present an argument rather by very limited understanding of that argument or that topic or the theory. So showing evidence of wide reading, wide research out there, varied research out there, shows the editor that you have read widely about this topic. You can present an argument from multiple perspectives that shows your knowledge of that argument. Formatting the paper in the language that you're submitting, especially if it is English, it is very important. You have to do a thorough review check. Now, we, of course, in research, we thoroughly discourage people using third party to do all this work. It should be your work. However, there are arguments to it that if someone reviews the paper, corrects the grammar and English, it is still considered to be the work of the author, as long as they are not making major changes to the work. So I leave it to the respective journal and your own ethics and the requirements of your own research or university. But in my opinion, you should do a thorough check, making sure that the text is readable, it is presented well. If you are the reviewer reading it, then you will not have any issues trying to find the argument, trying to find the logic, trying to find the research problem. What has the author done? Trying to follow the arguments. It should be logical, sequential manner. If you are calling something literature review, then you should explain how the literature was searched, how was the literature accepted, which literature was rejected. Now, some people do a general review of literature on websites. They just go and review some papers and they call it literature review. And a lot of people don't know the difference between a review of literature and literature review. Literature review is more methodical, more scientific. Now, if you are having headings like literature review, an editor journal would like to see, they would like to read about the criteria based on which you searched for the literature, you rejected or you accepted literature, how did you sort it. You can't mention a random year saying that this research only covers literature from 2017 to 2024 or 25 without giving the reason. You can't be just saying that you chose one database to search for the literature without giving a reason. You have to explain this. There has to be some scientific and methodical way of the way of presenting your work, presenting your research, showing the editor that you have a thorough understanding. Even if the work is theoretical, you don't always have to present empirical data or applied research. It can be a purely theoretical paper. It can be purely a review of theories. It can be absolutely something, an analytic paper. And that's fine. You don't have to always have data, but it should be scientific, it should be methodical, it should show that you understand what research is all about. It should show that you are aware of past arguments, present arguments, current arguments, what the future looks like for in the area that you are writing. So I hope these tips were useful to you. I don't want to make it too long. I can talk about it for an hour, but I'm sure you don't want to hear me talking for an hour. So please let me know in the comments section what you thought about this. What has your experience been? Your experience could have been completely different based on the area that you're writing, but I feel after talking to a few journal editors, we are pretty much on the same page, but would love to know your thoughts. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you soon with my next video. Bye for now.